All right, and we're live. Hey, everybody. My name is Roy Arthur Blodgett, and I'll be the host for today's wonderful podcast conversation. And I'm joined, as always, by my handsome, intrepid co host, Mr. Philip Leitz of Arids Only. Feels really good to be back in the saddle. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. We're really excited. And I'm going to introduce our guest in a moment. But before I do, I want to give a quick shout out to Happy Dragons for sponsoring this series and what we're doing here. I really appreciate them making this possible. And for those who don't know, Happy Dragons is a reptile's first platform marketplace. We're doing all kinds of kind of value-added content there. We have a community forum. You can do Q&As with experts in the various different aspects of herpetoculture. And we're also producing some kind of educational content there, in addition to some access to specific brand offers and like breeder updates, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, highly recommend checking out Happy Dragons in the Discord for them, which will be in the video chat for anyone who wants to check that out. So with that out of the way, I'm very excited to introduce our guest, who is Brittani Castrovinci. Welcome, Brittani. How are you today?
Well, thanks. You're a little, I think your connection's a little spotty there.
Yeah.
It got a little choppy for a second. I think it's probably
Just a
because of
Yeah.
the horrible wind.
Just a smidge.
How am I doing now?
A bit better now.
Yeah, video's
Okay.
terrible, but you sound great, Roy. So it's all good.
Okay.
You do sound,
Okay,
yes,
great.
the audio's good.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
Hopefully it'll be good on the upload, I think, probably, but this is probably because of the intense weather I'm having here. I have Starlink, so this is what has to happen. But anyway,
Yeah, that's
welcome,
true.
Brittani. Thanks for dealing with the poor connection on my end. And
No worries.
yeah, thanks so much for making the time to join us today. And maybe just
Thank
to
you for having
begin.
me.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's great. Yeah. I think just to begin, it'd be great to hear a little bit about just kind of your herpetoculture origin story. How did you find yourself interested in reptiles and amphibians and creepy crawlies and all that stuff?
So it actually started from a rather young age. I would say before I was 3, and sorry, this is one of my little doggies.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I didn't expect him to make an appearance, but there he is.
The whole thing's gonna go viral now.
Right.
It is, absolutely.
I definitely got into reptiles and amphibians, the whole herpetoculture scene before even mammals. So that's not your average story. So basically, it was sometime before I was 3 years old. Obviously, I don't have the best time frame in my head given how young I was. But I had a family friend who would take me frog hunting. So we all know the frog hunting, go and get a net, catch some frogs. So we'd keep them for like a week, and we'd always do it on the weekends. So we'd keep them for like a week in a tank, and then release them the next weekend, go catch more, rinse and repeat. It was just, I was so fascinated about like everything involving that. So that family friend decided to get me a snake.
Wow.
At some point when I was 3. So it was after a lot of that frog hunting stuff started. We well, actually, he surprised me with a snake one day, it was a fantastic surprise for me. I still actually do have, it's one of my first like best memories. So he got a snow corn snake for me, which for those who don't know, that's an amelanistic with an anerythristic. So she was pretty much all white with a bit of yellow on her. And as a baby, she was a bit more pink rather than like yellowish white. But I had her for a little over 11 years before which looking back, I do think it was actually a he. But we're going to say she just for my sake right now.
Yeah.
And so she lived rather shorter than most corn snakes, but I have no knowledge of her genetic history, her parents, anything like that. It was just like a pet store that had her,
Yeah.
So I don't know if that factored in or anything, but from there, I started going to the local reptile show in Cleveland when I was about 11. That's when things started kind of going full force, but I knew by the age 8 that I wanted to get into reptiles big time, like for a job. And I already knew what herpetology was, what a herpetologist was. And I actually started more on the amphibian side than the reptilian side of things, which I did end up, I mean, as of today, I would consider myself mostly a snake person. Um, but yeah, that was, I started going to the shows, and one thing led to another where I was getting some beginner snakes and lizards just throughout a few years. And then I really got more into things probably about age 15. That's when I started my Instagram page, believe it or not. So I've kept with it that long, but not consistently, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So with that, I ended up moving in with an ex-boyfriend when I graduated, and his dad bred ball pythons.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, mainly ball pythons. He did breed some other neat things, which I'll get into in a bit, but
Cool.
I got to learn the ins and outs of ball pythons, learned all the morphs at the time, but I mean, obviously now there's just too much to even keep up with.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I can't.
Was that guy? Was he doing it as a business, or was just a fun thing he did in the basement?
It was a business, actually. I mean, he had 2 legitimate outside sheds dedicated to the snakes. They were insulated, heated, temperature controlled, like that, all that stuff. I mean, it was incredible. And then he had a separate barn even for rats.
Yeah, for sure, of course. And so you had, so that's even a little bit more interesting on some level, because like, I feel like a lot of people kind of, maybe if they're not engaging with wild herps as a kid, like in the wild, they maybe went over to somebody's house and saw that they had a pet snake, a pet lizard, and kind of got stoked. But I think it's a pretty rare thing to like kind of get a little bit of an ushering into the space through the lens of like, I literally do this for a living. Like, it's very different. That's a young age to like tie in at that level, you know?
Yeah, and he was also what I really respect. One of the many things I really respected about him is that he was like the local. I don't know what it is in your guys' area, but the main person who goes out to like schools, daycares, libraries, that sort of thing. So in my
the
area,
local
it's like
reptile guy.
the jungle Terry is the one in my area. Now
Yeah.
I think I've only seen like one of Jungle Terry's shows, but either way, he was like that version down in Central Ohio.
Sure.
So I actually got to do a few shows with him, and he kind of mentored me into like, I never knew how to talk to young children at that age. I just was never around them, so I was like, how do I teach children about reptiles? And he took me to some of his shows. I was like his assistant, and it was cool.
That's awesome.
It was just amazing just seeing some of the looks on these kids' faces, like when they saw the big albino Burmese python come out, like that kind of thing. It was so just how they light up, and then some of them are scared, but then they warm up to it once you tell them about it, because something's not so scary once you know a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Can I'd like to just say a quick anecdote. So you mentioned, you said you were like 8 years old when you realized you're like, I'm going to do this for a business. Like this, because this is going to be my job.
I was like, I'm going to school for this. This is going to be my thing.
When I was like in 7th grade and figured out how to breed bearded dragons, and I was doing that a bunch, I spent, not only did every single report or essay or whatever I wrote in school revolve around herps, but also I was drawing, like my mom still has these, I think, these old drawings of like the logo of the business that I was going to have when I was older. That was a reptile business. Like,
how cool is that?
And so I just recently did a show here in Colorado, in Castle Rock, and there was this stood out to me because I mentioned it to Brendan, who was my former employee who was helping me out a bunch. He was helping me at the show, and this kid you know, because there's like a million people there, right? There's like 100 million people all over the place, and kids running by, like banging the glass, whatever. This one kid who looks like me, he was like maybe 10, 11 years old. He like walks over to my table and he looks and he's like, he's got his hands behind his back like an old Asian man. And he's like looking and he goes, Xenogama Taylor eye? And I was like, yeah, like familiar? And he goes, yeah,
Wow.
very cool. And I was like, really cool. And he like walked past and I had noticed that he had like a Bass Pro Shop hat that had like little golden pins on that were like little rod pins. And I was like, hey, homie, like one more question. Are you an angler? And he goes, yeah. And immediately launched into a full description of his rod and reel setup. And I was just
Oh
like,
wow.
I'm gonna remember you. I'm gonna see you again, dude. You're gonna be here in
Yes.
5 years. You
Yes.
know,
He's gonna be. Yeah.
that was
No,
That's
really
you're.
so
cool.
perfect.
Sounds like a kid
Yeah,
that's going somewhere with it for
yeah.
sure.
That kid
That
is
just
not.
reminds me of when I was younger at reptile shows.
Yeah,
I would just.
Oh yeah.
It
all
was so.
business.
It was kind of silly for me because I would kind of not brag, but I would act like a little show off at the shows, and
Who didn't?
I've always been into
Yeah.
the Latin names and scientific names,
Sure,
like that sort of thing.
sure.
And I would go to these shows and just tell the people, oh my gosh, that's a whatever, you know,
Yeah,
and they'd be
Yeah.
like, how did you? I don't even know they're like full Latin name. And I'm like,
yep.
Yeah.
yes, I read. I do a lot more books than I do like audiobooks or like
Mm-hmm.
podcasts or anything. I'm a big into books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of physical copies of books, but if you look on my books app in my phone, I've got quite various topics, mostly reptiles, but
Sure.
that's where I gain quite a bit of my knowledge. And then just the knowledge you get from other people, just having connections. I've had
Yeah.
a lot of connections for a long time, and
Mhm.
the things you can learn from other people, there's so much value to that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
from their personal experience, like you can't compare that to something you read in a book, you know? So I very much value the connections with people
Yeah.
personally. And Phil, by the way, I know I've been following your page for quite some years now because I've always
Yeah.
been extremely impressed with the work you do with
Ah,
lizards, especially. I mean, the
Yeah.
Uromastyx, some of those animals just blow my mind.
hey,
Oh
thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate that.
The best
I
Euros
put a
around.
hell of a lot of effort in there, so that's gratifying to hear.
I,
Thank you.
I absolutely can see the effort. I mean, the husbandry, your knowledge,
Oh,
it's amazing, truly.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much. I mean, likewise. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually that brings me to a few questions too. So um,
Yeah.
if so the last thing you mentioned in terms of like the narrative was okay. You know, you were kind of apprenticing in some way and helping this fella who was doing these shows and breeding ball pythons and doing his whole
Mhm.
thing, right? Um,
Yeah.
and you said you knew that you had a pretty clear sense that this was going to turn into like a business and something that you were going to do for a living. Um, how did you start to chase that down and try to make it a reality? And has it evolved into for you today? Like, take us through that whole trajectory.
So I'll be the first to say that it did not pan out, I guess, as well as I hoped it would. There were a lot of obstacles in life, naturally.
Sure.
Um, and so from there, I had ended up moving back home actually,
Mhm.
and I was working at a reptile shop, which I don't like talking about the name of
Mm.
it,
Sure.
but I was working with some very rare species there. And
Hmm.
so it was like
Mhm.
a kind of small start into getting experience with more of the rare species because this breeder that
Mhm.
I apprenticed with, it was his son who I was in a relationship with at the time.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of got into that.
Hmm.
And he worked like we got to see firsthand breeding blackthroat monitors.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
back in 2016, when that was not really a thing. I mean, it
Sure.
still is not very
Yeah.
common, but I mean, especially
Yeah.
back then, that was something pretty incredible to I mean, just help with and document all that. And then
Sure.
black-headed pythons. He bred those as well.
Nice.
There wasn't as much success with those ones, unfortunately. We did hatch out babies, but there were some issues with them, unfortunately. So that it was a huge bummer. And then there was a few other like quirky animals, I guess, that he had. A few Angolans, Angolan pythons, and trying to think off the top of my head. But either way, during that time, since I had access to those sheds and everything, and then also the house as well did have reptiles in it too.
Yeah.
I was acquiring a bunch of oddball species. I mean, the list is very long. But I mean, when I was about 16, that's when I got my first pair of Timor pythons.
Cool.
So this was a lot of this, like diving into the really rare stuff. That started at a young age, and now I did have a lot of help for sure. But I did my homework too, so at least what was out there at the time. A lot of things were trial and error. And so either way, going back to after I had moved back home and everything, I was, like I said, working at this shop, and just stuff that was coming from, like, captive bred stuff from Canada, Europe. We would get Guyana shipments, Solomon Islands. I mean, we were working with some pretty crazy stuff. Now from there, fun little tidbit of how I've traveled too, and I've done a lot of herping traveling, which has been so cool. I mean, the American Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. When I first went out there, I'm like, this is a different world. Like, am I really on the same planet still? You know, it was that kind of thing.
It's the best.
So I did a lot of herping out there because I just through connections, I found a mentor basically who took me to some really desolate spots, I guess, that not many people know about. You know, everybody knows about, say, you know, in Arizona, Ruby Road. That rings a bell for a lot of people, you know, but there were a lot of other roads that were not as popular. And we found some very, very cool species out there. And what I was still kind of navigating, like, where I wanted to take all this. I mean, I ended up through that connection. I was staying with him and his family for a little bit, and just learning from him because he was breeding a bunch of stuff too. And I was also, like, being in Texas, I was acquiring venomous because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do this. Like, I'm taking this opportunity, not missing out on it. So I learned how to work with a lot of venomous there because he was very experienced with them. So I naturally acquired a lot of that knowledge. And then from there, I decided that I didn't really know what I was going to do, like, out there. So there wasn't a lot of opportunities in terms of, say, like shops, like reptile shops or anything like that. So I was just kind of in between, and it was pretty expensive staying out there, like, all on my own, you know. Obviously it's easier to live with parents, so it's great. It's great except when it's not great, right?
Totally. Yep.
Either way, from there I ended up back here, and then I was here in Ohio for, I want to say, a year and a half before I ended up in Valdosta, Georgia. So that was Valdosta is in southern Georgia, about an hour north of Tallahassee. And again, I was doing a lot of herping out there, and I was also visiting Florida a lot more frequently since I do have family there. And I was going to the Everglades.
Great herping too.
It is, except at the time I didn't know what I was doing. I had a few trips, like, prior, and I was finding stuff, don't get me wrong, but nothing that I was really going for. Like, I really wanted to find a
Yeah.
Burmese python, and for some reason, I don't know what my luck is, but out of like the 5 times I had been to the Everglades, I did not find a single Burmese python.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's all about the conditions, you know.
You'll find a Brazilian
About the
rainbow boa first somehow.
that would be my luck,
Yeah, yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Seriously.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I'd honestly think that'd be great, but except for the ramifications. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
yeah.
Yeah.
all right, continue.
So either way, like along the way, I mean, I've just made a lot of connections because even living in South Georgia, I was going to South Carolina Repticon,
Nice.
and there was a lot of really nice people there. A lot of cool sellers and breeders that I got in touch with. So along all this traveling, from Central Ohio to um, Texas to Georgia. There's a lot of people I met along the way, and
Mm-hmm.
that has been a huge made a huge impact on just getting different perspectives
Yeah.
on keeping in general, first of all, and then just like I was mentioning before, that knowledge of the value you get from other people's experiences
Yeah.
that can't be replicated through anything else, really. So
Yeah.
either way, I ended up back in Ohio. Somehow Ohio has always pulled me back for whatever reason. It's some sort of, I don't know. I leave it up to the universe, and
Gravity
that's where it's,
vortex.
yeah, for real.
Yeah.
That's where it's brought me back to. So I am in Northeast Ohio, and currently I'm trying to my build build up some sort of, I don't like the term collection, but
Sure.
Yeah.
for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
trying
Yeah.
to build up a collection again, because I have had some seriously amazing animals in the past,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of goofy mistakes I made that I really look back on, and I'm like, it's just changed my perspective. Like, having that, I had a bit of a break from reptiles in general from when I moved back to Ohio from Georgia. So this was about 2022, around 2022. Um, from then till about December recently, I just wasn't, my passion wasn't on fire like it had always been. There were some
Yeah.
obstacles in life, and my passion kind of got put to the side a bit, which was really unfortunate. But I mean, coming back to it and just starting over has honestly been a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Oh
can look
yeah.
back and see how I used to do things, and with all the updated knowledge from even just a few years, I can utilize that to improve my I guess morals,
Yeah.
my view on keeping, breeding, all that stuff. So it's I definitely do a lot more advocating now in terms of I really just want the animals to have the best, and I want
Yeah.
people to want the animals to have the best. So with I definitely had a big shift in my Instagram, which I wish I had like a before and after. That would be pretty helpful right about now. But I
Yeah.
did. There came a point where I deleted everything off my page, handed my page to another person who was interested, and then, I mean, thankfully I ended up being given it back when I said I was
Oh, cool.
Brilliant.
interested in educating again. So
Yeah.
that was a very nice Christmas gift, to say the least. And
Nice.
Yeah.
if is it okay if I do a shout out to someone
Oh,
real
hell
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
of
quick?
course.
Sure.
To
Yeah.
American constrictors on Instagram. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. You did well with my page with your boas, and I'm very thankful that you gave me the opportunity again to do what I was doing, but a bit more of a improved version. At least I like to think.
That's great.
It's so
So
cool to have that opportunity to like step away, you know, and like kind of
Just get a
reevaluate,
breather.
and then get a breather and then come back to it. Like that's something that I've talked about a lot, because I actually had like a 11-year break from herpetoculture at one point.
Wow.
I
What
was
was that
like
like for you?
super well, I mean, I think there's some similarities in our story. It's, honestly, because like I was like you, when I was a teenager, I was like keeping some like pretty rare, unusual stuff, and like there was no information about it, and I was just kind of figuring it out. And
Figure
my
as you
big thing was
go, yeah.
like rare neotropical colubrids was like my thing.
Oh
But I
man.
was also in like a hard life environment, and I had to kind of get out of that environment out on my own and like figure it out. And so that's what I did. And then,
I can
but
relate
that
in
was
a
like,
sense, yeah.
yeah, but that was like, it took 10 years before I was like back in like, back in a space, in terms of like the structure of my life where I felt like I could responsibly keep reptiles again, where I could do it. And
That is
yeah,
exactly that is
yeah,
me to a T, where I
yeah,
really held off on getting anything for a while because I'm like, if I can't give this animal the best, then I
yeah,
just I don't want to do it at all. If I'm not gonna go
totally.
all
Yeah.
in, I'm all out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
That's how I was
my
too. So yeah, that's cool to hear.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I mean it definitely felt like 10 years being out of the hobby. I
Yeah.
mean it's been I wouldn't even like passion is probably an understatement for me. I quite
Yeah.
literally have an obsession
yeah,
with
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
reptiles.
we all do. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think all of us here do.
Our friend,
yeah,
And
so
our
I'm gonna
and
friend
fix
Phil
neither.
my
Trimper said
camera.
it's a disease.
Yeah,
But
We
it's a
had,
better disease than many that are out there.
yeah,
I would
yeah. Sure, sure. Of
say.
course,
for
of course.
sure.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
could be a lot
definitely.
Definitely
worse.
Yeah, and
exactly.
you guys are not alone in that too. I was in and out of it at various times in my
Yeah.
life for various different reasons. Like whether it was when I left high school and went to college, it just wasn't really an option
Hmm.
for me to keep anymore. I had to move a couple of times after college, like whether it was moving around here or I lived in like Texas and then overseas for a little while, and so there were times in my life where it just wasn't in the cards for me to have anything.
Yeah,
And
I've been there, and that's
yeah.
a big reason why I lost out. I don't want to say lost out, but
Hmm.
rehomed a lot of the stuff I used to have, and a lot of people do wonder, why are most of your posts past tense? And it's because,
Yeah.
well, one, I took so many photos when I had these
Mhm.
Yeah.
animals. I mean, I was just amazed by them, and I love to share them at least. And share about them.
Mhm.
So, one, I do it for the educational value, and then two, rehoming them and everything. I had gone through very hard times in my life where I couldn't really give them even the minimum, really. So I
Hmm.
had no choice. But I was like,
Yeah.
there comes a point where you're like, it's either these animals suffer or you just miss them, and I
Right.
Yeah.
chose missing them over them suffering because
Yeah.
there's quite a few that I've rehomed that I would do just about anything to get back.
Sure.
But
Yeah, for
that's not in
sure.
the cards, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I get it, and it's
I'm gonna
you
fix
know
my
I
lighting too for
oh
my
sure.
Yeah.
bad.
Do your thing.
My bad. Just wanna
No, it's
like,
okay.
there we go. That's a little bit
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
better.
That's great. The other that's interesting too because I think taking the time away, even when it kind of sucks to have to do it, um, I feel like on some level, some of the when I like at least looking back on all of my weird experiences in my life, they seem pretty necessary.
Yeah.
Like on some level, it was like,
Mhm.
all right, well, this maybe it would have been nice if it hadn't gone that way. I'd still like to have some of these animals or still be in a
Yes.
situation like I was in before or whatever it may be. But um, the the adjustment, there's times after enough time goes by where you feel like that adjustment, you're like, oh, it was really necessary. Like I'm glad that happened. I'm glad I did it because now I've been there before. I've like walked this path to some degree, so
Mhm.
it feels a little bit easier to navigate coming at it again and
Hmm.
having like not just a little bit more experience under my belt, but also like a fresh pair of eyes to address
Yeah.
this sort of same circumstance and situation. And then you mentioned like the mistakes and stuff too. I could get into some unbelievable mistakes I've made in herpetoculture over the years. Like, and I think you know,
It's just something that it's very taboo to talk about, I think, but I don't think it
yeah,
should be. There's
no,
no
definitely
shame
not.
in mistakes
Right.
unless they're intentional, of course, but
Yeah,
that's the definition of mistake is unintentional. So,
yeah.
I've
By
had my fair share of mistakes that some were like, how did I do that? I feel terrible. Like
yeah.
but then that just from how terrible you feel, you're like, okay, well we're never gonna be in that situation
Hmm.
again.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really important, I think a culture of transparency in herpetoculture is pretty important, because if you don't
Absolutely.
share the missteps that you make and the errors that you make, then you're depriving other people of the opportunity to miss those mistakes themselves. And so in my mind, it's like a moral obligation for people to share the mistakes that they have, and to have some, and especially because in obviously we all know this, that broadly herpetoculture is mostly is mostly a culture of like sharing successes for the most part,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's like the norm,
Yeah, it's
Of
quite
Yeah.
course, you
rare.
want to share what went right as opposed to
Yeah.
what
Hmm.
went wrong, but there's
Hmm.
so much value in
Yeah,
what went wrong
Oh yeah.
for everyone. I mean,
yeah.
there's something to be learned from each person. If it was, I do really wish it was more normalized to talk
Hmm.
about the errors because I look at my
Hmm.
page sometimes and I'm like, man, I look like this person who was such a flawless keeper, but that's truly, I mean, that's just not the reality. Social media
Yep.
has such a
Yeah.
good way of making
Yeah.
someone's life and everything look so perfect.
Hmm.
But I mean, everyone makes mistakes and some
Hmm.
grave mistakes too. I mean,
Hmm.
um, like
Yeah.
and I thought this podcast might be a great opportunity to share a few things that I've done wrong that have gotten me
Yeah.
to where I am today and why I do what I do, like on
Hell yeah.
Instagram, for example. I mean, this
Hmm.
goes for Facebook too because I do the cross posting, but
Sure.
I've been definitely doing my Instagram longer, but it is much more shifted to where I'm spending a long time. I mean, writing my descriptions so to relay about this animal and key factors about it, where they're native to,
Hmm.
the basics like that, but also, like from my experiences with them or work, like keeping them or working with them, that some of these animals are just not realistic to keep for some people. I just
Hmm.
one thing that comes off the top of my head is sunbeam snakes. So I've
Hmm.
definitely had a lot of interest on my page in terms of the sunbeam snakes I've posed. I had a group of
Hmm.
5. I ended up rehoming 4 of them, and I can't remember the sex ratio off the top of my head. This was back
Hmm.
when I was about 17, I want to
Hmm.
say. And those snakes, I mean, those are tough to actually like get to thrive. But they're
Yeah.
so cheap. Um, and I like to point out, like, okay, these most of these animals are imported, and even if you do get a captive bred, they really do require a varied diet, which that is another topic that I'm very now big into, just from recollecting all my experiences
Hmm.
with so many rare species. The varied diet factor
Mm.
is just so important. I mean, I even when it comes to something like a corn snake, offering a corn snake, um, like quail or
Yeah.
I mean, just something different that's also safe because there's like
Yeah.
this weird area of like they do eat lizards and stuff occasionally in the wild, and that's
Hmm.
probably not something your average person would want to offer to a corn snake in captivity. I mean, even if said animal like this, the lizard is frozen thawed to
Hmm.
help eliminate any risks, it's still not as safe as like rodents would be.
Yeah.
But I mean, quail are that's a great option, I would think, for just something as simple as a corn snake and how common they are. I mean, people are pounding them with mice and rats constantly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But one thing that I found so fascinating, that I read recently, because I was actually trying to help a friend locally with his corn snake, because she was a bit overweight, and he was feeding her rats, and I kind of dove a little bit deeper on their diet in captivity, and this is where I learned that quail and small chicks are can be offered, and they are relatively safe.
Yeah.
Since they
Super
are
safe.
bred in captivity, it's not like it's a wild caught lizard that even
Yeah.
freezing it, there's no guarantee that you're gonna eliminate all the possible risks with that. So
Yeah.
it was interesting to see that on Morph Market, somebody who had been in the veterinary field for a while did kind of the survey of they would measure, or you would post your corn snake with age, it next to a ruler, and the sex. I want to say there was maybe one more thing, but essentially she was calculating the BMIs of these animals, and
Oh
it
yeah.
turns out that the majority of people's corn snakes were
Super
considered
overweight.
obese.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
obese or overweight. Yeah,
Yep.
and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is just too normalized. I mean, the first other reptile that came to mind is crested geckos. Everybody posts these big fat female crested geckos thinking like, oh, these are just, look how cool this morph is, and this animal has like so many chunks in it, and I'm thinking to myself, this cannot be healthy. If you look at the
Yeah.
wild crested geckos, I mean, obviously you don't want to mimic the wild to a degree, because that at that point, that's survival. You don't want your animals to be in survival mode, but you don't want them to be so overweight that it could affect their health. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was just one thing I found interesting, particularly about corn snakes. It was like just an actual survey done,
Yeah.
where it was very carefully calculated, and just finding out that most people wouldn't consider their corn snakes overweight, but they in fact were.
I mean, this is this is a topic that's like near and dear to both me and Roy and lots of the guests we have on the show. This is a topic that's very near and dear to our heart. It's a good one to talk about all the time because,
Yeah.
I think it's really necessary on some level for if we want herpetoculture to grow and be more of like a cultural institution and not just like a weird side hobby that people do in their basement like me. It's really necessary to have like uh, this interesting infrastructure that we built up around feeders of various kinds, right?
Yeah.
But this is a great example of why just because you have that doesn't mean that we still don't take insights from like the past. So before the feeder infrastructure was in place, or when people had animals that the feeder infrastructure just didn't cater to, didn't have any option for, people had to get really creative, right? You had to find
Oh
different
yeah.
ways of finding food for the thing that you were keeping.
Yeah.
And I think you should probably keep that curiosity open through your entire keeping lifespan because you
Yeah,
know
just because an animal will feed on something doesn't mean that that's good for them long term,
totally.
in a
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And, especially knowing now a lot more about, like I recently, over the last few months, I was putting together a bunch of research about the history of like the basic feeder insect infrastructure that exists right now in the world. And what you find out is it's basically, this was, it started as bait. It was people who were, using insects for fishing. And then during World War II, because there were the American government in conjunction with the USD Department of Agriculture put together a project to scale up and breed various insects at a mass scale in order to study pathogenic transfer between insects and people because of all the uh, insect-borne illnesses that were getting contracted by soldiers in the war, because the losses from illness
Mm.
were basically equivalent to the losses of war. And so
Wow.
that the government is the one that scaled up the whole operation and automated and formulated and figured out how to do all of this stuff at a very large scale. And then when the war ended, they distributed all of that information to various like public entities and parties because people wanted to do it again for bait, or they wanted to do it to feed their chickens on a farm, or like whatever it was. And
Yeah.
then what happened was all those people who were doing it for bait and for whatever other piece of work they were using it for, found a market in the bird market and zoos and labs. And so that scaled up the market a step further. And that was in like the 50s through the 70s. And then in the 80s and
Wow.
90s is when herpetoculture popped in. And the, you know, the aquarium was part of that too, somewhere in there, the aquarium trade. So it
Mhm.
scaled it all up. And, but there's never been any consideration for which animals were picked to be the feeders. It was just the ones that we could do at scale and that could survive transport, which happened to
Yeah.
be the cricket, the mealworm, later, and the waxworm, and then later the superworm and the banded cricket and some of these, and the hornworm and black soldier flies. These all came in later,
Yeah.
and the you know, they work to a degree, right? Like they certainly can sustain whole colonies of animals for a long time, but there's just been, I'm guessing there's been little to no research done at all into like uh, what the sort of knock-on network effects are of feeding something that was chosen for its scalability, not for its utility for the animals it was feeding. And I think you
Yeah.
see a lot of similar evolutions happening. Like, how many of us have YouTube ads pop up all the time for like the farmer's dog and like all these really super great
Yeah.
dog ads and stuff like
Yep.
this? Like,
Yeah.
this is all coming from people just being more conscious and aware of
Right.
what's going into their animals. This is something I talk with Dean Missimer about a lot. Of course, Dean
Yep.
Dragon Hoppers has been on the show, you know, and it's a remarkable thing. So we got to, yeah. Anyway, that was a bit of a long spiel, but yeah,
No,
I'll
that was
stop.
great. I think that was great to put out there. I mean, it's very true, and then there comes the issue of, your big corporate pet stores, like the
Mm-hmm.
crickets, the mice, the rats coming from them. How nutritious truly are those? Like
Mm-hmm.
what? Because I mean, they're trying to make their money.
Yep.
It's not like it's a local rat or mouse breeder who may, like, even then I don't see a lot of them consider like how well they're feeding their feeder animals.
Yeah, no, it's just low cost, high calorie, high production from the animals. That's it.
Essentially,
Yep.
That's
yeah.
it.
So
That's all it is.
there's I've seen a lot of people do supplementing, like putting calcium liquid or powder for
Mm-hmm.
insects. Like they're like, we know to a degree that these feeders need some sort of supplementation because they're not the full thing, but also with a varied diet, you can kind of get a little bit of everything from
Yeah.
everywhere in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm such an advocate for varied diets, and I wish
Mm-hmm.
it was more, um, I guess, normalized to breed things like different lizards, and even expand what we breed in terms of insects too.
Oh yeah.
Rodents as
Yeah.
well. I know African soffers have been a thing,
Sure.
but very few, far and few between. Even then, so it would
Yeah.
be very interesting to see more people get creative with that. I guess I think
Yeah.
it would really show a big difference in these animals, and the ones that are
Mm-hmm.
difficult to breed. Perhaps, I mean, there's so much that could uh, be a positive result from just
Mm-hmm.
putting a little bit more thought into the feeders.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Super well said. And I think there's another thing to talk about here too, which is uh, we're sort of seeing similar inquiries into other aspects of herpetoculture, right? Like, so, you know, you mentioned being out for a while and then coming back in. And
Hmm.
when we talked about some of the things that had changed a lot, like one of the things that's changed so much over the last 20 years or so is lighting, right? Like lighting, that's the big
Yes.
thing. That's the big thing that
Oh
everybody
my
talks about. It's
gosh.
the biggest
Yeah.
innovations that are happening in herpetoculture. It's all lighting, right? And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, like the lighting history of herpetoculture has a similar spin. You know, it wasn't scaled up by the government, but I
Mm.
mistakenly and erroneously said in the past that lighting for herpetoculture evolved out of the aquarium sphere, and that's completely wrong. I didn't know this, but I was totally wrong. And it was independent of the aquarium trade. And now a lot of people did use aquarium lighting for their herps early on before the release of in like 92 or 93 by Zoomed of the first UVB bulb for reptiles. But it was an accident because those bulbs didn't produce UVB. They didn't produce any UVB at all. It was just they were kind of erroneously labeled as producing lots of different UV. It
Oh my
it wasn't
goodness.
UVB. Yeah. So and so it evolved differently for reptiles. But even now, with the sort of the beginnings of like a revolution in the lighting tech that we have for our animals, this kind of thing needs to be spread across all domains of herpetoculture, right? So similar investigative revolutions need to happen around diet, like we've just been talking about. They need to happen around housing. They need to happen around, like enrichment. And actually,
Yes, enrichment is, oh my
yeah,
goodness, that is something that wow, that's a topic I could get really
yeah,
deep into, because I honestly have a lot of regrets in terms of how just the amazing animals I've had, and how I wasn't giving them as much as I felt they deserved. Like, looking back,
sure,
I'm like, I could have done a lot better had I just done a little, put a little more time and money into it. I could have done so much better. And that's why I really want to encourage people to go all out for your animals. Like, just
mm-hmm.
do it. It's gonna be so worth it. You can't go wrong giving them more, but you can go wrong giving them less.
Totally, yeah,
So that was a big thing. And like I said, my mistakes and errors, regrets, things like that, it's not something I talk about as much as I'd like to. It's hard to incorporate into my posts,
mm-hmm.
in a sense, given the nature of my descriptions and stuff. I exceed the character limit on Instagram
Yeah,
quite a bit. I've
Easy
had
to
to
do.
shorten my stuff
yeah,
by a lot.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I like to do differently, because I know with even like Meta, who owns Facebook and Instagram and stuff, they
mm-hmm.
encourage you to keep descriptions short and simple and everything, and I'm like, no, I'm not, no, that's not
Yeah,
me, that's not my style. I don't care if it's the best way to do things to get the most engagement, whatever. I want to get the info out there. That's
yeah,
my thing.
totally.
So I've just had a really hard time incorporating any of my like specific errors into my posts. I've just focused more upon um, about the animal, and then also just like kind of difficulty level of caring for them, because of course people are going to see these interesting animals and be like, oh my gosh, I want one. So I want to be that person to say, okay, this is cool, but we need to consider this and
Mm-hmm.
this, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um I don't want to convey like the message that these animals are so beautiful, everyone should get them. I want to
Yeah.
be more realistic about it, even if it's
yeah,
not the way a lot of influencers do things or whatever. I like to take the time to do that. But with that,
cool.
anyways, I did want to talk about just enrichment. So going back to
Yeah,
that, honestly, I'm how do I put it? There's just a lot of regret when it comes to. I mean, I didn't keep my animals horribly, but I didn't keep them to what I would like. Had I had them now, I
mm,
would have
Right.
A, had a lot less, and B,
mm-hmm.
I would have gone way more like all out on things. I mean,
Sure,
for I don't know if we have time to discuss a few of the key species I've kept.
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I guess the big ones that um I would say are like the rarest, and the ones I also just enjoyed a lot. starting with the Sonoran coach whips. So those ones,
Those are
I
great.
mean,
Awesome species. Yeah.
oh my goodness. I would,
Yeah.
the things I would do to get my hands on one like the male I had before, that pink and black
Yeah.
one.
That
And
was the
it was
first
such a,
post of yours I ever saw. I remember it. Yeah.
and it's a shame how that story ended out.
Yeah.
Had everything gone right, I would have had one of his offspring right now, at least
Mm.
one.
Yeah.
But he ended up um, being sold to someone who turns out just kind of wanted money from it, and
Mm.
things went a little south there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll probably never. Now that animal has since passed, given coach whips do have a shorter lifespan than
Yeah.
most snakes. I
Mhm.
mean, you're
Yeah.
looking at 15 years would be a very old coach whip.
Yeah.
So he was already an adult when I got him. He actually ended up in Poland, which
Wow.
I was
Holy.
devastated when I
Wow.
found out, to say the least. I mean, given I was very happy to who he went to,
Sure.
Uh-huh.
great person, but just how truly torn I was, that I was like, I'll never get my hands on his genetics ever.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that animal did pass, just of old age. It wasn't anything husbandry. I mean, the person who
That's
ended up
good.
with him was super experienced with those oddball
Mhm.
colubrids. But just for like that animal, for my coach whips, I did have a lot of controversy back in the day. I got a lot of flack,
Mm.
and I think for a good reason, to be honest. I utilized tubs for them, but
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
that was because they ate. I had so much
Yeah.
success in getting these species to feed, which at the time, that was one of the most challenging things about keeping coach whips and racers in captivity. So I kind of found something and stuck with it, and didn't even think to try, okay, what about, I don't like considering aquariums.
Mm.
I mean, they're definitely good for some species, but when we're talking about coach whips and stuff, I think going the route of something custom built, for the size, the species, that
Sure.
type of thing, to be able to cater to the lighting. I think that is far more important. And
Mhm.
I was basically, I would keep the room at a certain temperature, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of utilized it where, obviously, the higher parts of the room were warmer because heat rises.
Sure.
So I was keeping them during the daytime. I was doing about an ambient anywhere between, gosh, 88 to 95.
Mhm.
And that's
Wow.
ambient.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
mean, they did great, though. I mean, in terms of feeding. But I just look back and I wonder how much better they could have done, how much possibly how much more colorful they would have been had I utilized better lighting. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I truly had a lot of success in getting fresh wild caught ones to feed pretty darn quick in captivity. And I think that utilizing tubs could be a great stepping stone, but not the ultimate um, space for them. I
Mm.
would. So I'm very careful now, because I would love to get back into Sonoran coach whips. They are so difficult to come across in captivity, and quite pricey if you do happen to find one, and
Mhm.
also
Mm-hmm.
most likely wild caught. So
Sure.
you know that is a species I do plan on keeping and trying to breed again.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, I have an absolute obsession with the whole Masticophis genus.
Sure.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they are all
They're awesome
fascinating. I would
snakes.
love to have every
Yeah.
single one, but now with this consideration of, okay, I want to give these guys big enclosures so that they can be fully enriched, because they're very intelligent snakes. They remind me so much of lizards, in the sense
Mhm.
of just how they're very aware of their surroundings, how alert they are, um, even the way they look at you. I mean, they'll look you in the eye. Like, you know how bearded dragons kind of do that side eye thing of like looking at you. I wouldn't say it's like as dramatic as that, but there is a level of, you can tell there's something going on behind those eyes, like, for
Yeah, their
sure.
body language conveys a lot of like awareness and like responsiveness to what you're doing.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and that's like one thing I just beat myself up on looking back, is like, I did give them big tubs, don't get me wrong. They were lengthy, they could stretch out. Um, but that's not how I would ever do it again. I do think it's a great stepping stone though, for if you were acquiring a wild caught animal. For some reason the tubs just seem to give them a sense of security that, um, another enclosure just doesn't seem to offer that same amount of like tight space. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the wild, I have herped a Coluber and
Yeah.
Masticophis in the wilds throughout the
Mm-hmm.
years.
Yeah.
I mean, you often find them under things you never expect they could fit under. Even I found
Yeah.
them under things like, you were using that to hide under when there's, a tin sheet that's this big, 20 yards away, like that type of thing. So I think that's where I did it right. And I don't like acquiring wild caught animals anymore. That's a big controversial topic though, in general. So, but it's a necessary thing in my opinion, for certain species. I mean, obviously there's that saying, I guess, ball pythons would never be as big as they are had someone not gotten wild caught individuals, so it does
Yeah. It's where everything
benefit the
comes from at some point.
species. Yes, that's what I was trying to say basically.
Yeah.
But so I anything wild, I've always kind of had this, that where anything I had that is long-term captive wild caught, if it originated from the wilds, I had intentions of trying to breed that.
Yeah.
And I have not been very successful with breeding things, and it all boiled down to, just another mistake of not trying hard enough. I mean, for my Masticophis, for example, I simply, I'll be totally honest and upfront. I just got lazy. I would put the males with the females and just hope for the best. I didn't do anything in
Yeah.
particular. And this came from just prior experiences of watching others breed things with what seemed like no effort. So I had this idea in my head that, okay, this animal is feeding, it's seemingly doing very well, it's gonna breed. And even knowing that they do need like a brumation period,
Right.
I had figured this was so silly. I mean, obviously I was around 18 at this time. And I laugh at my old self for not diving into things as much as I should have. But I utilized a lot of like fresh air from outside.
Sure.
And I thought that might have been enough to mimic the seasons, like just opening the window for an extended period of time every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just had my fingers crossed that would do the trick instead of doing an actual brumation. Now, given I
For
did
some
have a lot
species it
going,
is, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it can be enough.
no, that, yeah, but not
Yeah.
Masticophis. We'll say
Sure.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
They definitely need that genuine brumation
They need
period where you
they need
gotta cool them
a deep
off.
cool. Yep.
I mean, you got to put the effort in, and I beat myself up for it because I'm like, had I just put effort into this. But I mean, there were a few other things going on in my life, for an extended period of time that weren't addressed, that had factored a lot into why
Sure.
I didn't do what I would have done today. Let's put it
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
that. So that's why I've truly narrowed down my interests in what I would keep again. And my new rule for myself is, even if it's captive bred, anything I acquire, I intend on reproducing and trying to
Mm-hmm.
breed. I That's just me. I personally, I'm not going to judge someone if they don't have the same rule for themselves and keeping. But that's just my new mindset of, okay, if I'm getting into this animal, I'm going all out for one, and two, I want to try and make more of it. So
Yeah,
great
I'll judge those
example.
people. It's okay. No, so but actually, can you say more about that? Because you know, I think a lot of people might kind of have a tendency to kind of drift the other way when they start thinking more about
Right.
the you know how do I give these guys a better life, and how do I uh, improve what I'm doing and whatever. I think a lot of people, like, the breeding aspect of it would take something of a back seat. So what
Hmm.
leads you to put a priority on that? Because I agree with that with you personally. Like, I think if there's you should probably breed your stuff. Like, everybody probably should. But anyway, can you elaborate on why you settled on that as a priority?
Give me a second just to say that I I like how you think there, like how we're thinking there, but we also
Yeah.
don't want overproduction
No, we
because
do. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
they're I mean, look at retics, ball
Yeah, yeah,
pythons.
sure.
I mean, okay,
Yeah,
but
totally.
anyways, so your question one more time just so I can
Mhm.
get back on the train I
Yeah,
was
what led
going
you
for.
to put on a priority list of things and say,
Priority.
I want to produce these things. Like, I want to breed. If I get something, I want to breed it.
Because the species that I've narrowed down to like what I really want, and now mind you, it is a long list only because 80% of the species on my list so far aren't even in captivity to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
um, so with me personally, it's just that working with such oddball, hard to find
Mm-hmm.
species, I want to make more of them in captivity for others to
Mm-hmm.
appreciate, one, and two, breeding definitely gives you a lot of value in terms of knowledge, just the experience of doing that. You can learn things that, I mean, aren't, like I said, with connections with people of their
Hmm.
experiences. Like, this is a whole other ball game of your own experience that you learn about these animals in a way that just can't be conveyed over a book or an article or anything
Sure.
like that. So I want the full experience as well, but just also to contribute in a sense. One of the species that I truly want to get back into again is Timor or Lesser Sunda pythons.
Hmm.
Lesser Sunda's pythons.
Mm-hmm.
um, I just think they're so underappreciated, and we're
Mm.
seeing. I know there has been a few successes within the past few years of breeding them in the U.S. at least, and there's
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of success in Europe. Um, but it's still an animal that, to me, they I mean, they are top three reptiles of all time for me. I mean, I
Sure.
Mm.
really have taken a liking to them since I got my first one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's something I'd really like to see produced more because they're
Hmm.
the closest relative to the reticulated python, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they have that retic look to them in terms of
Yeah.
face scalation and everything, but they don't have that crazy unmanageable size of mainlands. And then
Right.
also it's just such a uniquely patterned and colored snake as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're no retic morph. I mean, I would say a few you could say they're similar, but there's nothing like a Timor python in my opinion. They even have this iridescence to them that is very, at least mine, from whichever locality they were. And I have seen throughout the years, just seeing so many individuals, either online or in person. I've had a total of, gosh, 2.2 in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, on both occasions that I had them, it ended up where I had to rehome them. And
Yeah.
I
Mm.
actually did have a female pass on me from, uh, I mean, it was really unknown, but I she did have a lot of nematodes.
Oh, gnarly.
Mm.
Yeah, you could see them just right under the skin. They say these animals are captive hatched, and That's a very weird area there.
Yeah, the
So
old classic herpetocultural bait and switch. This is captive bred for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely
yes,
captive bred.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a private, it's a local breeder. They prefer to remain anonymous. Yeah. Sure they do.
Uh-huh.
exactly. So
Yeah.
yes,
Typical.
it was an animal that was advertised as captive bred, and when I hear this is just one instance of many times I've heard it, that they're like, oh yeah, in the country they come from, the locals breed them and then send them to us. It's like,
Mhm.
I maybe a fourth of that may be believable to some degree.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
that's extending a bit, but
It's just like when people say farm bred Uromastyx. It's like, yeah, you mean like they put a fence around some habitat and just pull them out of the ground when they hatch. That's not farm bred,
Yeah.
dude. You just don't. It's a
yeah,
wild caught animal. Yeah,
that's
it's a
why
wild caught
Yeah.
animal.
straight wild caught.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fake
I
news, dude.
don't like the term captive hatched or captive born. Like
Mm.
for me to really believe it, it A has to be from someone reliable, and B advertised as captive bred and born, or U.S. captive bred and born.
Yeah.
Now, so right now I'm currently working on a project of. I mean, this is a longer term project. Not something that's going to happen in the next year, say. But I did just get a baby green cat snake, a female, and she is
Oh,
U.S.
cool.
captive bred.
Very cool.
I do believe her parents were captive hatch or whatever you want to call it. But I can't say for sure. I would have to talk to the breeder a little more about that. But either way, she was born in the U.S. in captivity, and that was good enough for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She's beautiful, and I plan to get an unrelated male from the same breeder
Sweet.
sometime in July or August. So that's my first this is my welcome to coming back to reptiles. Is I dove into green cat snakes. I've worked with them in the past at shops, and just they were awesome. And I do want to incorporate all the new things I've learned in terms of variety of diet, enrichment, things like that into this animal, and then I want to acquire rather slowly, because there's still so much more I want to learn about certain species before I get them again if I've had them before, such as Sonoran coach whips and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm always learning new things about every species, even if you think. Even if I've thought oh, I know just about everything that's out there, I always happen to stumble across something new somehow, some way. So
Yep.
I'm doing
Oh,
this
yeah.
very carefully, because I just see a lot on, especially social media, of people just getting animals seemingly every week, and it just sparks the question of, what are you doing with these animals? How are you providing for them properly? And I mean, that's a very common thing that I do see that just raises a lot of concern. I mean, I'm sure some people do actually have the capability to give them a
Sure.
lot, but I mean, there's definitely a lot that don't. So,
Definitely. There's definitely
that's
like
a
that
weird area.
revolving door. There's definitely like that revolving door aspect to some some of the way people some folks will do things, like things just pop in and
Yeah.
out pretty
I
easily.
and I'll be the first to say that I used to be that person,
Yeah, same.
100%.
We've all done it, man. I've done it.
For a
We've
lot
all
of
done
us,
it.
it's I think a
Well,
stage in
Yeah, it's a
herpetoculture
it's
stage
too, where we're
for
it's
sure.
a phase or
trying
a
to figure out,
phase.
yeah, we're trying to
You know
figure
how
out what
when
we
you're a
like.
teen, you're trying to get a feel for
Yeah.
life, and you're doing weird things with your hair, or
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
similar to
I did
what
that.
people do with reptiles, I guess. And it's sad, but it's also necessary for some people.
And
I
well,
mean that.
and yeah, you're totally right. And I've phrased it recently as like research and development. Like if you're doing it as a business, on
Mm.
some level, like you have to, whether it's for your own enjoyment, just keeping your learning alive, like keeping, getting new things that might fit into your space, that might contribute in some regard. They can teach you about what you're already doing because they might have needs or preferences that are slightly off from whatever it is you're doing now, especially if it fits in very
Mhm.
easily to your current environmental niche, you know. But of course, all of that comes with the caveat of like, if you're going to do that, you're still practicing stewardship, so you still have to
Mhm.
uh, do your due diligence and make sure that if you decide this particular project didn't work and I'm moving on, you still have to do right by the animals involved, So,
Yeah,
Right.
and
absolutely.
it can be done for sure, but it definitely begs the question, like how many people are actually putting in that time.
Yeah.
My guess is it's depending on the day of the week you ask me, I might say it's probably more than I think, and then on other days of the week it's probably less than I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of
So,
changes like for at least for me too. It kind of changes like just based on what I've been seeing online recently.
mhm.
I mean, social media is just so influential, which
Yeah,
is
it's
why
wild.
I'm so honored to do what I do because I like to be genuine in getting my word out,
Hmm.
in sharing knowledge, just being a general advocate for reptiles, and
Totally.
given my following, it's I love this. I mean, this
Yeah,
is. I mean,
the
I have a
best.
passion for reptiles, and then I have a whole separate passion for sharing about how cool these reptiles are.
Yeah, it's the best.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a great opportunity to reach a lot of people, and it
Hmm.
is difficult though to navigate a bit because it's like in my post, obviously there's that character limit first of all, and second, there are people who have barely seen snakes in their life that will come across my posts, and I want to be able to cater to them too in a sense,
Sure.
and
Right.
talk in a
Yeah.
language that they can understand about the
Yeah.
animals. So,
Have you
um,
with your with the character limit thing? One workaround. I'm sure you already know this, so feel free to tell me to fuck off or whatever. But one thing that I'll do to get around it is instead of putting it in the post, or I mean in the description of the post, I'll put it on notes on my phone and then take screenshots of those notes and post them in a series so that way I can skirt the
hmm,
character limit. And you can do that in a post where you can post multiple pictures. So you just put the first
Right.
picture is the animal
the
that you're trying
animal.
to talk about or whatever the topic, and then you just scroll through and it's like reading. It's just like reading a book, So
Oh my gosh,
it's
I
one way to get
actually have.
around it.
I've
Yeah,
never thought of that. I do utilize the notes in my phone to write my
yeah,
descriptions, and
Yeah.
totally.
of
Yeah.
Just
course
take a screenshot.
when I go to paste them, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, you can't post all this, sorry.
right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
that to get any additional info out,
Yeah,
that's a fantastic idea. So
it's a
I
good
could
one.
definitely do like a lot of key points in the description, but then if people are interested in going a little
Hmm.
further, then there's
Yeah,
that too. But I also do like to encourage without actually saying it. I
yeah,
want to encourage people to want to do the research on their
yeah,
own
yeah,
because
definitely.
I mean
Yeah,
I can't relay an entire research article in one of in a single post as much as I'd
sure.
love to. So it's nice to just get that interest out there, just spark that interest in people for them to just go in on their own time and be like, oh my gosh, like this animal is so cool. I'm looking at different photos of it
Yeah.
online. I'm seeing these research papers, these articles, these whatever it is, books about
Mhm.
them even. I like to try and encourage that without outwardly saying like go Google it,
Sure. Yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
that's part of the intention behind a lot of my posts too.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and sorry, Roy, if I keep talking before you get
No,
the
you're
chance,
good. No, you're good. Good. Good.
but you mentioned also sort of like the difficulty in navigating some of this stuff, right? Because um,
Yes.
the the reality, I think the cold hard reality is that herpetoculture is still very much a wild west. Like
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. Like there's no playbook for how to do any of this, and
Yeah.
that is true of any particular vocation inside the herpetocultural umbrella, right? So whether you're a breeder, a feeder, like a feeder production startup, if you're
Mhm.
an educator, if you're trying to go like the influencer route, if you're trying to go like the Dave Kaufman or whatever kind of like YouTube
Vlogging
figure,
kind of thing. Yeah.
or the Garden State Tortoise, like you talk about any of these people, there's no school, there's no class, there's no book you can read that tells you how to do it, because
Yeah.
not only is it a relatively new uh, profession, it's also come of age in the time of all this interconnectedness and social media. So it's just no playbook. And so every person I've ever spoken to now who has done anything of note in herpetoculture and they do it for a living, every one of them figured it out on their own. It was like straight up trial by fire, and it was just,
Yeah.
some of them went, and like maybe either had some business education before or got business education after or whatever it is. But no matter what way you cut it, the how you get to what you're trying to do is totally up to you on one level, and additionally, the what you're going to do inside herpetoculture is also very difficult because it might
Yes.
change, and you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I mean, my goals with herpetoculture throughout the years have changed so drastically. I
yep,
mean, age 8, obviously my goal was I want to be a herpetologist.
yeah,
Now, I didn't think about the specifics. I just knew I wanted to be working with reptiles as a profession.
yep,
And with getting older and then, um, I guess, income being a very different scene throughout the years, I realized that that's probably not the path I would take. It, I'm interested in it. Don't get me wrong. It would be so cool to be like an actual PhD herpetologist.
Yeah.
However,
definitely,
financially for the degrees you have to get, for
yeah,
me, I just don't think that's gonna be in the cards. And I also just this is probably something a bit controversial to say, but I really don't think you need something on
you
paper that
don't,
says, "Hey, I know this."
you don't, you
Yeah.
definitely
So, I mean, don't get me wrong, the people who have gone that far and have done that, that is incredible, and I greatly commend them for that. I think that is amazing, and there's definitely things in those classes to get to that point that
don't.
like are go super in depth, that you can just learn some really odd things that you would never have guessed.
Totally.
But even the general biology aspect of it, of learning biology in general and then using that knowledge to apply it to herpetoculture, there's a lot of value in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I don't knock anyone for having the degree for it by any means. It's just not something that's in my cards as a career. I want to do reptiles as I wouldn't even say a hobby, because I feel like that's just not the right word for it. I do want to be on a bigger scale
Professional
one
level.
day. I would love to get to a point where I could just do reptiles, but also with business and reptiles that I've learned throughout the years is it can be a hobby or a business, but it can't genuinely be both.
Mm.
There comes a lot of issues in at least in my experience. I
Mm.
can't say this is true for everyone, but from what I've seen from people who do it as a living, you got to factor a lot of costs in, and those costs can kind of conflict with your morals
Sure.
of things, of how well, even the feeder thing, for example, about what you were saying earlier of it being
Mm-hmm.
on such a big scale, and it wasn't for that specifically for reptiles. It was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of just to be on a big scale. um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's stuff like that that makes me a little weary on doing it solely as as my income.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to have something else that kind of pays the bills, and then I want to enjoy reptiles, but also get to a point with them that I'm working with a lot of these uncommon species, and
Mm-hmm.
some species that I have plans with. I mean, and for those who are listening right now that have access to a computer, I highly encourage you to write some notes down, because I'm about to list off some just incredible species that I never hear talked about, that and I have yet to see some of these in captivity even, but they are so fascinating. And so like this is just a little bit of my list of, if I saw this in captivity eventually, I would keep this. And I am seeing stuff like this happening, in the sense of several years ago. I want to say about 2018. One of my dream snakes was the Grabowski's rat snake, or the Grabowski's beauty snake.
Yeah.
They were not in captivity in 2018, to my knowledge. And nobody was talking about them. I mean, we had Ridleys, we had Blue Beauties, we had Taiwan Beauties, Chinese Beauties, all those, but not the Grabowskis. And there was like probably 5 good photos of them on the internet at the time, and now in the recent few years, I've seen them popping up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I so want to like tell people like, oh, I knew about this before it was cool, like that type of thing. But I was just so elated to see like, oh my gosh, and that is also a species that I would love to work with and breed. And I do want to see them bred a little bit more first before I dive into that, because that's probably a pretty expensive animal to mess up in a sense of having the trial and error. So for those ones in particular, I am waiting a bit to see how they do best in captivity, essentially. But just a few examples of some snakes, like I wrote down one of the first on my list is the falcon indigo. So that's Drymarchon caudomaculatus. They are
awesome.
so interesting looking. I mean, compared to all the Drymarchon, they really stick out in terms of like pattern and color, like those white blotches and speckles they have.
Super weird.
Weird and incredible. And I'm like, how have these never made it into captivity? We have all these other Drymarchons. I mean, the indigos and crebos. Where are these guys? So I'd love to see them pop up. And because I mean, they're from Venezuela and Colombia, so it's not like we've never had animals in snakes in captivity that have come from there. So it just makes me wonder, like, when will these pop up? So that's a big one for me. Another one is I wanted to bring this one up because I know a lot of the people on my page are very interested in the tree colubrids, or the arboreal colubrids in general. So Oxybellus wilsoni, so the Rhotean vine snake, or the I used to know them as the golden vine snake before I heard the name Rhotean come up a bunch. And I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly, to be honest with you. Rhotean.
Like from Roatan Island.
Roatan.
Yeah,
okay, so that's how you say it. Yes, in Honduras, So those, I mean, out of all the Oxybellus species, I mean, they're wild. Just straight gold, and all the other ones are, you've got your brown ones, and then you've got your green vine snakes that are the South American version of Asian vine snakes. Essentially, the like convergent evolution there.
Sure.
But the wilsoni are just so different from every other species in the Oxybellus genus, and like I said, that's one that I've been waiting for a while to pop up, and I'm hoping eventually it will. I've heard that there were a few in captivity a long time ago, but I mean,
if the iguanas are here, they'll be here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Seems like it.
Yeah, I mean, things have a way of getting here. There just has to be. It seems like there just has to be a demand. So that's why awareness, I think, is so important in herpetoculture, just in general.
Definitely.
I mean, they say, with how many snake species there are out there, it seems like we only focus on like a fraction of them, when there's so much more that, if you just do a little bit of digging, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this snake is incredible for this reason, and this reason. Like,
sure.
One that
totally
that comes to mind that's just people just don't know a lot about is it was the what it was one of the West Indies boas. I'm thinking of the Latin name, but I'm trying to remember the common name. It'll come to me. But it uses the defense mechanism that horned toads do, or most horned toads do, where they
wild.
coagulate from their eyes. So there's a boa that does that, and it's the Tropidophis melanurus. But I'm trying to think. The I remember
they
more
call
of the
them
Latin names than the
tropes
common names.
sometimes.
I haven't heard that one actually. That's
The
tropes.
Tropidophis.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of
Super
funny.
cool.
It's a weird name, but I've heard them called that before.
I'm not surprised. There's a
Yeah.
lot of funky names for some species out there.
Tell me about it.
But I mean, some other species that this one some people probably do have a good amount of awareness of, but one that I would really love to see pop up in captivity is the natal rock pythons. I mean, they are just another really cool, like, how do you put it? Just similar to the Burmese and African rocks, but again, so different at the same time. And when I first saw a picture of one, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a crazy African rock python in terms of pattern. I'm like, this looks so cool. And I've just never seen them in captivity. Obviously, we've had all the other I guess Burmese African rock complex species. We've got the Sri Lankans, the Indians, all that, but not the natal rocks. So that one was very weird that for some reason that one just didn't kind of make it in the U.S. at least, to my knowledge. And I would really love to work with those one day. So that's another one for me, and I just have this whole crazy list on my phone, and obviously I'm not able to keep all of these species, but it's more of, if I see this start to pop up, I'm going to be looking into it as far as breeding and keeping. So another one I really like is the Amazon Falls Fairy Lance. So that is the Xenodon severus.
Those
I
are
think
amazing.
those,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. I mean, I've seen the Xenodon I'm probably saying this wrong. It's the Dorbignai.
Dorbignii.
Dorbignai.
Yeah,
That
I
one's
have those.
You have those?
Yeah, I have a pair.
Oh my, no way.
Yeah.
Wow. I actually, the last time I remember seeing them in captivity, was probably around 2018 or 19, where someone was posting them on Facebook, for sale. But
Yeah, and
I
they're
had
not a
no
lot
idea
around. I don't know why.
Yeah, it
But
stuns me because they seem to do fairly well, and they're just like a really cool type of hognose. I mean, they're obviously not the heterodon North American hognoses that are so popular and everything, but they have their own uniqueness to them that I think should really be appreciated. And I mean, there's several Xenodon
Xenodon in
species that
general.
I love. Werneri is another one. The Guinean green snakes.
Yep, I had a Werneri for about a year at one point. It's one of my dream snakes for sure.
You're joking. No. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what happened with that one?
It eventually died. Yeah. They so as far as I know, Werneri, we've never had more than one in the United States ever before at one point, or more than one. I should say we've never had more than one of each sex. So we've had like two males in the country at a certain point and like one female at another point. We've never actually had like a sexed pair, at least since I've been aware of them, which is roughly the last 10 years. And the longest one has ever lived was actually, I think, the one that I had, which was a little over 12 months. So they come in with a really high parasite load, and because they're frog eating specialists, so there's a lot of like bioaccumulation essentially. When you live at the very bottom of the watershed, there's a lot of stuff in there, and so they come in with a high parasite load, and I did give mine treatment and everything, and it was doing pretty well. But I think that the consequences of both parasite load and like the stress of import and all of that stuff was just like a really
The
intense toll on that animal, which is what happened. Which is, as far as I know, what has happened to all of the Verneri. Um,
Mm.
but it
yeah,
did eat. It ate well. I fed it bullfrog legs and also reptilinks.
okay.
So it ate.
So
They're frog
you got
eaters,
the
so they
variety factor
yeah
down, seems like.
yeah. It was
And
an
that's the
awesome
thing with some
snake,
of
but
these. That's the thing with some of these rarer ones that I'd really like to get into is just how realistic it is that they will essentially do well in captivity. I mean, there are
yeah
definitely species out there that just can't do well in
yeah
captivity, and it's unfortunate for
yeah.
people who are passionate about them. But at the same time, we do have to absolutely do the best by the animals, and but I do
I
think it is
think that
important to at least try.
yeah, and I think that honestly, like Verneri is a really good example of a snake that I think would probably do really well if we could get them to the F1 generation.
Mhm.
Like if we could, like if a gravid female was imported and like someone was able to successfully hatch the eggs, I think the babies would do well.
Oh my
Because
It's a
goodness,
lot
I
of
yeah.
think
those.
it's the issue is again the parasite load.
Yeah. And you
And
can't just give them
so
a whole dose of Panicure, I wouldn't think, because
no, no,
they're
no,
they're
no.
so their gut biome is so delicate, and that's true for so many of
Exactly.
these snakes.
Hmm.
Exactly. You have to be delicate with them. And so I think that if we could ever get like a pair, and they bred and we're able to get some offspring, those offspring would do well. But I think that the
Mhm.
problem up to this point with that species is, like I said, that we've literally just never, they come in such low numbers that, like at the time that I had that one, it was the only one in the country that anyone had.
Wow.
And I have a friend who also has kept them before. She's had a few different specimens, and same thing. She's only ever had one at a time, or at one point she had two, but they're both males. So
Damn.
Ah,
they're
man.
just tough. If we can ever get a pair or a gravid female, I think that we could start getting them established. Obviously, we would need more
Yeah.
blood than just one animal, but
Sure.
I think that it's possible. It's just difficult with how small the numbers are.
Right, and I would love to see the community in general just kind of start focusing on these on species like that to get them established. Because I mean, we know for a fact that retics, berms, ball pythons, corn snakes, the list goes on. We know those ones do well. We know we can get really cool morphs out of them, and a lot of people tend
Mm-hmm.
to just kind of pursue the morphs of them rather than dive into the different species. Like I would really love to see. Um, retic keepers get into Timor pythons.
Mm.
I mean, they are
Right.
so similar, but yet different at the same time. But that is truly one that I would love to see more of. I mean, for people who like the look of retics, but just kind of want a different animal. I mean, given they can get quite a big size. I mean, 10 feet.
Yeah.
They can get to that point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that is also something to consider. But still, it's less than a mainland, and dwarves do exist of the retics.
Right.
However, I think it would be cooler, in a sense, to focus on these less appreciated species.
For sure.
Totally.
For sure. I mean, I think the challenge of getting more species diversity inside herpetoculture is like, I think that's a really really interesting one to mull over in
Mm-hmm.
general, because
Mhm.
of course, for more reason than one, more diversity in herpetoculture species wise is a net good, right?
Yeah.
um, but I also think I'm suspicious that like there might be some sort of like metaphorical cap on the amount of variety
Mm-hmm.
we can have. Like whether that comes,
Yes.
like on some level, it's like you got to have some variety just for the sake of variety and difference. But like it does appear that long term, any companion species of any kind, plant or animal, tends to kind of converge on one or a small handful, and obviously that's something to kind of fight that uphill battle against that.
Right.
But it's like, but it's like it's yet another ethical concern. It's like on the one hand, like so for example, Uromastyx. That's like the main thing that I do,
Yeah.
and I've produced all of the ones I can get here in the United States.
Yeah, you've done some
But there's
amazing work with them.
Oh, thanks. But there's some that like it's pretty tough to make the argument to have them, right? Like so, for
Yeah, you
example,
have to be seriously dedicated for some of these species,
yeah,
and
like
the amount of dedicated keepers to the
yeah,
amount of people that are maybe just keeping them because they're pretty.
totally.
That's a very valid concern when it comes to that diversity.
Yeah, and so I had, for example, Molly Uromastyx, which is Uromastyx molliensis, and then or Dispar molliensis, and then I had the golden Dispar, which is Uromastyx Dispar Dispar, and they look
Okay.
those and Molly's look almost indistinguishable, even to someone who's like real up on Euros. You can get individuals
Yeah.
where you're like, I don't know which one I'm looking at, honestly. Like it's real tough, especially if they're
Wow.
in like a developmental stage, like like in that 2 year range where they're only just now starting to get some of their adult
Yes.
color development. It's hard. It's like really hard to tell what you're looking at, and
Mhm.
so it's like that's a level of diversity where it's like, do you need both or do you need one? I mean, like because
Yeah, that
if you're producing all these animals that are distinct from one that looks quite similar, you might have people who either don't know the difference and integrate them anyway. You might have people who don't
mhm.
see the value in the difference. So
Yeah.
it's almost like when we talk about species diversity, we're really talking about like difference and contrast on some level. It's like we want like a diversity of
Yes.
looks on some level, and you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
my personal pet theory is that as the sort of species narrow, uh, sort of like the visual differences, within those will probably suffice for that some of that difference. But you also want like personality differences and behavioral differences and care
Yeah.
differences and ecological differences, right? So you want all these things to kind of work in favor of what you're doing. I just think, and then you couple that with the fact that, I mean, the list of animals that I've seen that I know exist that I can't get is 10 times longer than the list of animals that I can. You know what I mean? It's just
Right there with you. Yes.
you go to any
Yeah.
you could just go in on any country, any region in the world. There's badass animals that exist there. Badass animals. So it's like,
Absolutely.
it's such a challenge on some level,
It sure
and
is.
but it's yeah, I could get in. I could go way further on that, but I'll shut up.
No,
We'll go on
that
for
was
20
very
minutes at a stretch.
that's a very valid, I mean, reasoning for not having something like this. And even as much as people like us would want that,
Mm-hmm.
there is the reality of it too. Like I was kind of
Sure.
saying, like, for some of these species, I mean, you really need to be dedicated
Yeah.
and know your stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a lot of the, like, for example, colubrids that I want are very, very diet eaters. So it's like, how many people are gonna go to that extent of getting frogs, lizards, tadpoles? Like, for
Sure.
example, when the dragon snakes came into captivity at first, everyone was getting them. I
Right.
I bet the majority most likely died.
Yeah.
Because
Usually they
how
do.
many people were gonna sit there and try and find a reliable source of tadpoles, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So there's that issue of how ethical is it really to bring in a lot of these species. Like, even though there
Mm-hmm.
are some dedicated keepers, I
Yeah.
think herpetoculture just has to get to a point to where there's enough people who are dedicated,
Yeah.
to
Yeah. You
bring
want the
stuff
juice to
like
be
this
worth the
in.
squeeze.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Definitely.
essentially. So
Yeah.
it's like I get a little bit ahead of myself with like some of the species I want, in a sense.
Easy to do.
But it's so easy because I mean, you just come across a picture or something of one and you're like, that is amazing, I need to learn more about it, and then you find out 10 cool things about it and you're like, I'm sold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and another thing I was just thinking about too is like on some level, the greater the diversity of species of herpetofauna that you're working with in the broader institution of herpetoculture, the more diversity you'll need in terms of your feeder supply and your base,
Yeah.
sort of like your base care supply needs, right? So that's a good
Mhm.
thing on some level too, but it does mean that you have to, one of these things I always come back to is either like horned lizards or Eurocentron, like
Mhm.
they're all anteaters, and it's like,
Yep.
man, like, yes, of course, I'd love to keep some of these wicked horned lizards. I mean, they'd just be
Yes.
perfect for me here, and they're the coolest lizards in the world. They're just
Right.
so radical. But it's like, man, I can't, I don't want to have like an ant operation in the backyard. It's like it
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
cool. It would be cool on some level because I also happen to like ants. Like entomology is super freaking
Mhm.
cool. But it's like, it's hard. I think about this quite regularly. Like anytime somebody mentions something that they're working with that they speculate might need something really specific, and I'm like, damn, that's got to be a pain. And like, how there's like
Yeah.
a lack
No,
of sustainability involved in it. Except,
that's very real.
yeah, but
Um
yeah, all herps were sort of unsustainable on some level up until a point, right? So it's just a matter
mhm.
of getting enough people together to say, hey, like, you set up the infrastructure, I want you to make all the ants, and then I'll buy them
Yeah.
from you. You know?
Yeah, that type of thing. Yeah, I had a very good. I was in a very good point when I was keeping a lot of my, say, lizard eaters. Even some frog eaters and stuff. Working at one of the shops I worked at, they regularly got in live lizards, like anoles,
Hmm.
house geckos,
Mhm.
and different, like, I don't want to say cheap, but like common frogs, I guess.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I kind of had it made there in a sense of I could keep a lot of the lizard eating snakes. Like that's when I was big into my Ahatula, which are the Asian vine
Mhm.
snakes. I had my Mexican vine snake, or the Dodden's vine snake, which
Mhm.
he was awesome. And I never would consider, I never even thought of giving him a rodent like a pinky mouse or anything like that. I had it made where I could just go to work, come home with a lizard every week or two, and we're good.
Hmm.
So I mean, but now looking back, it's like how easy is that going to be now? I mean, since then there are definitely more things catered to lizard eating reptiles, and there is definitely more feeder diversity compared
Mhm.
to back then, but just not. I still don't think it's enough. And one thing that so many people have told me is, if you really want to make money with reptiles, make the feeders. And it's so
Yeah.
Oh
true.
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard people say that
it,
too. Yeah.
I and it sparks my interest too, of like, is this somewhere I might want to go, to where
Hmm.
I can
Mhm.
be that bridge for people to, like, say they want to keep an Asian vine snake. They're really passionate about an Asian vine snake, or any vine snake, whatever it is, a lizard eater, and I'm sitting there breeding 4 or 5 species of small lizards for them. I mean, I just wonder if people kind of started doing things like that, like how far that would go, and how
Sure.
much more success we could have, as well as, there are a lot of people who are reasonable in saying, I love how this species looks. I would love to keep one, but I just can't supply the lizards or the
Mhm.
frogs or whatever it is. So it would be so cool if, we could come together as a community in a sense, and, someone breeds a lot of one species and someone breeds the other, but we have it kind of known that, you can
Mhm.
go to these people for what you need for the snake you want, that
Right.
eats like a specific diet. I think that would take us pretty far. Honestly,
Yeah. And I mean, that I think that particular avenue probably requires more people being open about the realities of like, look, yeah, it is a reptile and I'm going to feed it to another reptile. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
it's
that's
hard, but it's
you
like,
see, that's a that I should have said something about that, but to me personally, I've just become I don't want to say desensitized, but just I know that these species they're not going to do well if you switch them to rodents, and like
sure.
Right. Oh
I'm
yeah.
having this like debate with myself with my my green cat snake. You know, she has been feeding on live pinkies for the breeder, and um I'm going to continue that for a bit, but now there's a point of where I'm like, okay, I want to do variety. However, at the same time, this is a captive bred animal. It doesn't have the gut biome of a wild caught one, where it may be
Mhm.
able to handle a little bit more, in a sense. So that's where I'd love to see stuff popping up, like and I've heard people talk about doing this, like as little as breeding green anoles in captivity. Like we know we
Totally.
can do it. We know it's relatively easy and doable, but
Pictus geckos would be another great candidate.
yes,
Yeah.
they would. And but then
Or,
there also is that do I want to feed these beautiful reptiles to another
yeah.
reptile? So
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
but
that's a tough one.
yeah, but that's the thing where I say it's like, all right, well, we got to have like a, not you specifically, but like as like a community, you just got to have the conversation around like, if you don't think like a mouse or a rat or a rabbit is like a badass, awesome animal that is super cool and make great pets and have little personalities and little preferences, like you're out of your mind. Like and
Yeah.
if you're comfortable with the scaling up of it for rodents, okay, well, you should probably chill a little bit about like an anole or a gecko or something, or
Yes.
an earless lizard or something being bred as a feeder in the same context, because
Mhm.
you can fit both. If people can keep mice as pets and rats as pets, you can keep an earless
Yeah.
lizard or an anole or a pictus gecko as a pet too, and it can be a feeder. It's like if you
Absolutely.
eat
I think
these,
there's a
like get over it.
balance.
Yeah, and
There's
Mhm.
definitely a balance with that,
yeah,
you know. It'd be cool to breed anoles like green anoles in captivity, just in general as pets too. I mean,
totally.
I'm sure there's people who think that they're awesome and just
I
want
do.
them as display. Like I guess I love the Anolis genus
They're awesome.
personally. Fun story about me is I found back in 2017, I was at a one of the chain big pet stores, a Pet Supplies Plus in
Uh-huh.
Central Ohio. I found an Xanthic anole for sale there. I
Hell
mean,
yeah.
it
Mhm.
wasn't being sold as an Xanthic. I just saw. I was like, this is a bright blue green anole. Like I know what
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
is, and it was just being sold as a regular anole, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm buying this. Now, I didn't have as much success with them as I wanted to. The female, that beautiful Xanthic female, just passed from. We don't really know. I mean, she did have. I will
Mhm.
say she had a lot of enrichment. We had her in a big
Mhm.
I can't remember the dimensions, but it was one of the biggest vertical exoteras. And then we had the male in there. He was just a regular green, but I got him from uh, along with her, actually, just in case that he was from the same area that they were collected or whatever. So
Hmm.
Mhm.
unfortunately, we lost her, and that was such a bummer. But the male ended up living quite a few years, and he was actually very handleable too. So
Sick.
Wow.
I trust me, I love anoles. I love house geckos. I mean, I think they're definitely underappreciated. But they also just it's true that they're the best feeders
Hmm.
available currently for a
Yep.
lot of these lizard eating reptiles.
Hmm. Hmm. I used to breed Coleonyx variegatus, the banded geckos, the little desert banded
I
geckos.
love those.
They're great.
Yes, my
Well,
ex had a group of them, and they were the neatest little things. And everyone would say like, "Oh my gosh, what kind of leopard gecko is that?" And it's like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
hold on, let me tell you a story."
yeah. No, they're awesome, and I bred them not just for the geckos, but I also bred them to feed to the collared lizards that I was working with because the collared lizards just
Wow.
need live animal prey at some point.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Phil and I are both recovering from colds,
Yeah.
so we're like coughing and sneezing. Um,
It's funny you say that. I literally just got over some sort of respiratory virus that was going around in my
Everybody,
area. Like,
everybody's
everybody's
got
it's
it.
getting
weird.
something.
Like, it's summer and we're getting
Yeah.
these
It's
weird
the Delta.
viruses. It's just odd, but it is what it
Yeah.
is. So,
Yeah, totally. But I remember years ago, I posted a picture of one of my collared lizards eating a banded gecko, and somebody just got so pissed and was like, "We just feed crickets, bro." And I was like, "All right, well, you
mm,
clearly don't understand anything about this animal, so I'm just going to ignore you." But fine,
yeah, I
you know,
mean,
Yeah.
it's part
some
of the
people are
reality.
very set in those ways, and I don't judge them. I don't
No, no,
blame
of
them
course not.
for
It's
it.
totally understandable.
It is. It surely
Yeah,
is. But you also you come to a point where you're like, okay, these are very cool animals, but any animal that eats another animal, you kind of have to sit there and say, okay, this is not only natural to a degree, but it's necessary if we want to keep this other animal alive.
yeah. Definitely. And the idea that there's like a hierarchy to the value of life is like an absurd concept in the
That,
first,
yes,
first place, you know?
oh my
Like,
gosh.
I don't see a difference in value between a mealworm or a superworm and a Euromastix at the end of the day. Like,
They're living,
there's no substantive
breathing
argument that would
creatures.
suggest they're different in terms of value to me,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
yet it can feel difficult, Like I have San Esteban
Yeah.
Island spiny-tailed iguanas, and yeah,
Oh
95.
man, those.
Yeah, they rule like 95% herbivorous, but there's photos of them on iNaturalist eating chuckwallas or zebra-tailed or whip-tailed lizards. Like they are predatory. And
Hmm.
so if anything, it's very rare, but if anything hatches here all jacked up, guess who gets it?
You know where it
The
goes.
iguanas.
Yeah.
They eat it,
And
and
that's
they're
the other thing
stoked.
about that is, there's obviously, with a lot of the morph breeding that's going on in a lot of the common species, there's just naturally a lot more issues with the animals to where they probably shouldn't be pets at that
Yeah,
point. So, I mean, having those animals that prey on animals like that is that it's good in that sense too, to where those animals don't have to go to waste. In a
hmm,
way, they can
yeah,
go to nourishing another life, which I think
absolutely.
is awesome. Yeah, and I know, like, there's a lot of people who will put aside any ball pythons or corn snakes or whatever it is that just
Hmm,
either don't make it or are not doing well.
hmm,
King stuff like that, they'll put them aside for people who have king cobras and offer
yep,
them
totally.
online. So
Hmm,
I
Yeah.
think if we did that on a larger scale, too, in addition of adding more diversity and breeding feeders,
hmm,
there could be a lot more potential for us to keep these really oddball species and do it very successfully.
definitely, absolutely. You're totally right. So also, we are creeping up right at 2 hours here, and in an effort to be respectful to all of your time and Savannah's time and some of the other folks, I think we should steer towards our some of our last couple of questions. And
Yeah.
I say that though with the caveat that we obviously have to have you back on because there's clearly tons more we can talk
Oh
about,
yeah.
more things we
Oh
can
my
dive into.
goodness. I
You know,
Wow. That's
so
a Oh, thank you. I
yeah,
that's
definitely. Yeah, of course.
I'd love to be a guest again.
Yeah, that would be
Awesome.
great. We'd really like that. And
I'm
so,
probably not the best person verbally to get information from, I guess. I have to
no,
think about what I say, like, before I say it
either.
most of the time, which is why I like messaging and texting, and like
Sure,
the way I do my post is like I can really think about how I want to phrase
sure,
things, because I wouldn't consider myself the most witty person in the world, to be
sure,
honest. So
sure.
this was definitely big for me, and
Nice.
but I wanted to give it a go, and I'm
Yeah,
so grateful that you guys had me on here.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we're
been a
stoked
pleasure.
you would want to do it. Roy,
Yeah.
you wanna
Yeah.
go after the last question there?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, Brittany, we close all of our shows with the same question for every guest.
Okay.
And that's just why herpetoculture. And you can interpret that however you want. Like some people take that as like, why do I do herpetoculture? Like, why do we, the royal we do herpetoculture? Why does it
Royal.
matter? Um, so
I see.
why herpetoculture?
Okay, so um, that is a very thought-provoking question, and I like that. I like that you asked that. For me, it was just kind of destiny. It seems
Mm,
like for some reason, at some point in my life, many times, I've always gravitated back towards reptiles. Like that passion has never died or anything. And in general, I think it's important to appreciate reptiles through captivity and things like that, because getting close up and hands on with these animals is totally different than looking at photos of them. So um,
It's true.
for me, it's like I think that just educating and getting people hands on with a lot of species sheds a lot of light on them that you can't really get through just reading about them or seeing pictures of them or anything.
For sure.
And like I said, for me it was just destiny. I mean, I started with at 3 years old with my corn snake, and that just sparked so much in me, that I just had to know more. I had to
Mm-hmm.
get into all these obscure species and everything. So in summary, I guess why herpetoculture?
Mm-hmm.
Because these animals are also very important, not only in the wild, but just to people. I mean, they can have a lot of sentiment to people. I know I've had a lot of sentimental animals,
Yeah.
reptiles and amphibians myself, that they really leave an impression on you.
Mm-hmm.
They hold a special place in your heart. Um,
Definitely.
so yeah, I don't want to like go trail on for too long, because yeah, I
It's
want to
okay.
be respectful of
that was a
everyone's
great
time.
answer.
But
No, it's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that that part about them being important to people, I think really that one really hits home.
mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
that's at the end of the day, that's the whole point. Is they're all, I mean, on some level, they're all important to us for one reason or another, and that's got a lot of inherent value.
Yeah, and I think
totally.
just like the educational shows that people do, like those who commit to going to daycares, libraries, things like that, schools. Um, Sometimes like you get a kid out of that crowd that takes that and carries that with them forever, and it
Mm-hmm.
sparks like a whole. I mean, it changes their life essentially. I know for
Totally.
me, getting that corn snake at 3 years old, that changed the course of my entire life from then on out.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's so cool.
Yeah.
they are very important animals that are so underappreciated, by the general public, and they at the end of the day they really are animals, just as important as from an insect to a dog or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. They all have equal value, and they're misunderstood, and they deserve a lot more awareness. So
Definitely.
right now I do what I do on social media for the appreciation, the awareness, the education, just to shed light on like, hey, these are awesome animals, and
They rule.
I want to spark something in people the way something was sparked in me, and I've got this positive feedback about that. Which, gosh, when I hear stuff like, oh my, like comments of people saying, I have to look into this animal now, like I have to
Yep.
go out and do my own research. Like this has amazed me. That I don't have words for how that makes me feel. Like just knowing
Mm-hmm.
that I was able to reach someone like that, and um, yeah, like I said, with having a rather large presence on social media, I love that I'm able to have such an influence on people, and I try and use that for the good.
Yeah,
Definitely. Nice. That's
it's a good thing
awesome.
to do.
Very well said.
Yeah,
Great stuff.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
cool.
yeah, Roy, do we have things to say as a close at the end, or are
Um,
we?
I don't
Are there
think so.
any
I think just
questions
thank
like
you.
that? Were there any like
Yeah, are there
comments
anything?
that people had
Oh, I forgot
questions
we do
by
the Q&A.
chance? Yes, yes. Let's if we have
There
time
was
to
a couple in
answer a
the
few.
yeah. There were a few things in the Q&A that I already answered in the chat. But if there
Okay,
are any
I'm
questions for
not able
folks
to see the
who,
chat, so.
Yeah, here. Let me see.
um,
I'm gonna check also.
if anyone brought anything up, let's see.
Oh, actually, I see the chat thing now. Oh my goodness. Well, that would have been awesome to have been able to see this the whole time. Sorry, new kind of platform for me. So my apologies to everyone out there who
No,
No,
has been
it's
it's
okay.
cool.
eager.
We do the same thing. Let's see. I don't see too many other than that earlier one, right? Am I
Yeah,
missing
Kristen had a
anything,
couple
Roy?
of questions that I think that I got to. Um, but yeah, it seems like it was mostly just folks listening in this time and less of the Q&A,
Sweet.
Okay.
which makes sense for
That's awesome.
the topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Well, we'll do it again. So
Yeah, we'll definitely do it
we'll do
again.
another episode. Probably
Yeah.
the other one will be the non live streamed one where it's like the one we pre-record and just the that's probably when we'll do the next one.
Okay.
If you like to,
That would be great for me because
yeah,
I'm more of the type of person where I like to really think about what
yeah,
I'm gonna say. I don't go off of wits. I guess is how
Yeah,
I would put it.
sure, sure,
Sometimes I
it's all
yeah.
don't
right.
phrase things the way I mean to relay them. So
Yeah, there's definitely something about the pre-recorded one that can feel a little freer in some level because it's not
yeah,
live. There's not the pressure of
Totally.
feeling
yeah,
like, oh, people are paying attention. So it's like
yes,
you're just talking on a Zoom call, messing around, just being like, yeah, snakes are cool, right? And
yeah,
that's the best kind. So
yeah.
we'll do it again, and because
Awesome.
we got a whole mess of stuff we could get into on top of this. So um,
Oh, seriously,
yeah,
I wish I could have trailed off on so many of the topics we brought up, but yeah,
it's
there's
good to have
so
more than
many
one.
things I'd love to talk about that I could probably talk for days if I had the opportunity to, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
I think we
Well, the
all
good
have
thing
that
is
in
the
common
shows
about
we do are
reptiles.
yeah, yeah, and the good thing is all the shows we do they tend to be like long form, so like
Totally.
it's pretty
Hmm.
common that they go like into that 90 minutes to 3 hours kind of range. So
Okay.
that's yeah, so we can do that. We can do several. It's good. We've only
Yeah.
had a handful of repeat guests so far, but that's going to change just because there's so much that's going on and so many things are changing all the time and people's collections
Mhm.
are changing and what they're working on is changing and things
Oh,
come up and whatever.
absolutely.
So we'll have plenty of opportunity to hash out lots of cool stuff. Yeah,
Wonderful.
For
Yeah,
sure.
and there's
cool.
definitely experiences with some rare species I've worked with that I'd love to talk about and
For sure.
discuss. So,
Yeah,
Let's do
definitely.
it.
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah.
All right.
All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you
Cool.
guys
Well, I'm
so
gonna hit the
very much
button.
for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Such a
And
pleasure.
thank you
And thank you
all
again.
who listened to this. I mean,
Yeah.
for those who came from my page and just everyone, honestly.
Yeah.
I had a lot of nerves being able to do something like this. For any of you who have followed my social media for a long period of time, you guys definitely know I don't do a lot of talking in videos or anything that has to do with live or talking. So this was big for me, but I really wanted to push myself to do it and get to discuss with some other very knowledgeable people, being Roy and Phil.
Thanks.
Well, we're really
Thanks
glad you
very
did.
much.
So thanks.
Awesome.
Um.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
I
Thanks to Happy
hang
Dragons as
tight.
well.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
thank you,
I'm
Happy
gonna go ahead and hit the
Dragons,
button.
and
Yeah. You hit the
all
button, Roy, but hang
right.
tight, Brittany.
Or I guess I
Okay.
think Savannah.